Black CEO wrongfully arrested at subway 24 hours later. He sentences the same officers. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The subway station was half asleep that morning. The kind of quiet that hums before the city wakes. Steam drifted from the tracks, shoes clicked. Then, hey, you, stop right there. Two officers stepped into the frame, their voices cut through the air like metal against glass. A man looked up mid-40s, calm posture, suit pressed but plain, a leather briefcase in hand. His name was Darius Cole. But right now, to them, he was just another black man standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Officer Grant squinted. You got a ticket for that train? Darius nodded. Of course. He reached into his coat pocket, slow, deliberate. But the second officer, Miller, was already moving closer, hand resting on his belt. Don't get smart, sir. People like you always have stories. A ripple ran through the platform. The small group of commuters began pretending not to look, phones lowered, eyes darting anywhere else. Darius held his ground, breath steady. I'm heading to court, he said softly. Grant chuckled. Sure you are. His words weren't loud, but they hit hard. The sound of quiet humiliation. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Darius. He tried again. If you'll let me show. Miller cut him off. Show me your ID, right now. Darius opened his wallet, sliding out a sleek identification card, embossed seal, silver trim. Grant snatched it, flipped it once, then smirked. Federal? You think this is real? Come on. He handed it to Miller. Looks printed. Darius didn't flinch. He'd seen that look before when he was 20, applying for a lease, and told the apartment was already taken. When he was 30, being followed by security inside a jewelry store. The faces changed. The tone didn't. You have no reason to detain me, he said. Calm, level, almost too polite. That's not up to you, Miller shot back. We'll decide that. The air thickened. A faint buzz from the tunnel echoed like static tension. A teenage boy raised his phone to film. Put that down, Grant barked. The boy lowered it, embarrassed. Somewhere near the turnstile, a young metro attendant, Elena Ruiz, watched the scene unfold. She knew she'd seen the man scan his pass moments ago. Her hand hovered near the intercom, unsure. Grant stepped closer, crowding Darius's space. Empty the bag. No need, Darius replied. It's legal documents. Then you won't mind showing us. He hesitated, not in fear, but in disbelief that this was still happening. Miller's tone hardened. I said, open it. The camera would hold that moment, the stillness before injustice strikes. Darius finally unzipped the briefcase, revealing only papers, files, a fountain pen, and a folded copy of the Federal Review. The irony was almost cinematic. Grant glanced at it and sneered. Yeah, sure. Lawyer stuff, huh? Let's take him in. We'll sort it out downtown. The handcuffs clicked. Cold metal against warm skin. Someone gasped. Elena whispered to herself. No, not again. As they pulled him away, Darius didn't resist. He just looked straight ahead, eyes steady, voice quiet. You're making a mistake. Grant smiled. We'll see about that. And in that moment, amid the fluorescent hum and the smell of dust and brake oil, justice itself seemed to stop breathing. The cell was colder than it looked. Gray walls, flickering light, that damp underground chill that sticks to the skin. Darius sat on the bench, hands still cuffed, wrists red from steel. The officers filled out paperwork outside the bars, laughing about something that wasn't funny. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence unnerved them more than protest ever could. Officer Miller leaned against the door frame. "You look familiar," he said. "You some kind of lawyer?" Darius looked up slowly. "Something like that," Grant snorted. "Yeah, right. You people always think you're something. If you don't." He didn't answer, just looked down at his palms, the faint crease marks from the cuffs already fading. He thought of how many men he'd seen sit in that same position, accused of crimes they didn't commit. He'd defended them, judged their cases, fought for their release. And now, here he was, on the other side of the bars. The irony was thick, but the humiliation thicker. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the noise of the station fade into memory. In his mind, the image replayed, the officer's smirk, the bystander's silence, the camera that almost filmed but didn't. He remembered something his grandmother once told him when he was just a boy in South Carolina. "They'll question your right to stand where you belong. Don't argue. Let your presence be the proof." Her voice was calm, like scripture, and that calm lived in him now. When the desk sergeant arrived, things began to shift. The man looked at Darius's ID still lying on the counter. His eyes narrowed. He picked it up, ran his thumb over the embossed seal. "Where'd you get this?" "I told your officers," Darius said, tone measured. "It's real." The sergeant paused, picked up the phone, dialed a number. A beat, then another, then silence. The next words hit the room like a dropped gavel. "Release him, immediately." Grant frowned. "Sir, Now," the sergeant snapped, "and return his belongings." As Miller's jaw tightened. "What's going on?" The sergeant didn't look up. "Turns out this man wasn't lying. He's a federal judge, Judge Darius Cole." Grant froze. The laughter vanished. The air turned brittle. Darius stood slowly, straightened his jacket, and picked up his briefcase. His voice was steady, almost too gentle. "I told you I was going to court." Miller muttered something under his breath, but it drowned in the silence that followed. The kind of silence that comes when arrogance finally meets consequence. Darius walked past them, no anger, no gloating, just quiet power. The hallway stretched long, fluorescent lights blinking above him like a gauntlet of judgment. He didn't look back. Outside, the morning sun was rising, washing the city in pale gold. He exhaled once, deeply. A breath that carried years of restraint. As he reached the courthouse steps, his clerk, Maria Jennings, mid-30s, efficient, loyal, was already waiting, phone in hand. "Sir," she said, breathless, "we received word about what happened. Are you all right?" He nodded once. "I'm fine. But they won't be." She hesitated. "You mean the officers?" "Yes," Darius said, looking up at the stone pillars of the courthouse. "They'll be standing right there tomorrow." Maria's eyes widened. "In front of you?" He adjusted his tie. "Exactly where they belong." The camera would follow him up the steps, each stride slower, heavier, more deliberate. The man who entered was no longer the same one humiliated beneath the subway lights. He was walking into the very room that symbolized everything they tried to deny him: authority, respect, justice itself. And tomorrow, that room would see what happens when silence becomes power. Fade to black. The courthouse buzzed with its usual rhythm, the echo of heels on marble, the shuffle of case files, the low hum of murmured protocol. But for Darius, everything sounded different that morning. Each step across that polished floor was deliberate. Each reflection in the glass reminded him of the cuffs, the sneer, the disbelief. Maria walked beside him, carrying a folder marked, "Internal Review, Transit Division." "Sir, they're saying the officers had probable cause," she said quietly. Darius's gaze stayed forward. "They had bias, that's all." She hesitated. "Do you want me to recuse you from the hearing? It involves—" "No," he cut her off. "Justice doesn't get to look away when it's personal." He pushed open the doors to his chambers. Inside, sunlight poured through tall windows, dust swirling like floating evidence. On the desk lay a stack of reports: the arrest file, the surveillance footage, and a written complaint from Elena Ruiz, the metro worker who had dared to speak up. Darius skimmed the pages. "She filed this the same night?" "Yes, uploaded directly to the Civil Oversight portal," Maria said. "Good," he replied. "She'll be called to testify." He paused. The room went still. "I want this handled by the book," he added, voice low. "No favors, no shortcuts. They will face the same system they thought they owned." Cut to later that morning. In a conference room 2 floors below, Officers Grant and Miller sat with their precinct captain. They weren't laughing anymore. "Look, we didn't know who he was," Miller said, his tone defensive. The captain rubbed his temples. "You arrested a federal judge on suspicion of loitering." "How exactly do I explain that?" Grant shrugged. He looked. "Don't finish that sentence," the captain barked. But Grant couldn't help himself. He looked out of place. Plain clothes, standing near restricted access. "Come on, what were we supposed to think?" "You were supposed to think like professionals," the captain shot back. "Not like gatekeepers." The words hung heavy. For the first time, the arrogance cracked. Back in chambers, Maria entered quietly. "Sir, the media's already calling it the subway judge case. Reporters are camped outside." Darius sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Of course they are. Do you want to release a statement?" He shook his head. "No. Let the record speak for itself." She nodded, then hesitated. Elena Ruiz confirmed her attendance tomorrow. "Good," Darius said. She saw what truth looks like, scared, small, but still standing. End quote. He looked out the window toward the city skyline, the same one that had watched him grow, struggle, and now judge. Voiceover deepens. Power doesn't erase prejudice. It only reveals who flinches when they see it wearing the wrong face. A faint knock on the door interrupted the thought. A clerk stepped in. "Sir, Internal Affairs just finalized the schedule. The hearing's been moved up. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. You'll be presiding." Darius's eyes didn't widen. He had expected this. "Then we begin on time," he said. "No delays." The clerk lingered. "Sir, they'll be in your courtroom." "I know." He turned back to his desk, the sound of his pen clicking once like a quiet gavel striking wood. That night, alone in his office, Darius replayed the subway footage. The camera caught everything: the shove, the handcuffs, his calm refusal to resist. He paused the video on one frame, Grant's smirk as the cuffs locked. He whispered to himself, "Tomorrow, you'll stand again, but not over me." Outside, thunder rolled over the city. Rain streaked across the courthouse windows like blurred justice finding its way through glass. And as lightning flashed, his reflection merged with the gavel's shadow. The scene faded with his final line, half prayer, half vow. "Let them see what accountability looks like dressed in silence." Fade to black. Morning light spilled through the courthouse atrium, soft but tense, like the air before a storm. The security guards whispered as the crowd grew. Reporters, citizens, even a few commuters who'd been there at the subway station that day. Word had spread fast. The judge they arrested was the judge they'd face. Inside courtroom 3A, Darius Cole sat alone at the bench. No robe yet, no gavel in hand, just stillness. The oak-paneled walls seemed to breathe with him. He tapped his pen twice against the folder marked People vs. Grant and Miller. Below the heading, Witness, Elena Ruiz. Maria entered quietly, closing the door behind her. "She's here," she said. Darius looked up. "Is she nervous?" Maria hesitated, terrified. "She's never testified before." "She spoke when no one else did," Darius said. "That makes her qualified." Cut to the hallway. Elena Ruiz, 25, metro uniform freshly pressed but hands trembling. Her phone buzzed non-stop, messages from strangers, news requests, threats disguised as comments. She turned it off and took a breath that didn't steady her. A reporter called out, "Miss Ruiz, do you regret filming the arrest?" Elena froze, then answered softly, "I regret that it needed to be filmed." The cameras flashed, but her voice carried past them clean, unpolished truth. She entered the courtroom moments later, eyes scanning the space. It wasn't just a room. It was the place where power had reversed itself overnight. Grant and Miller sat at the defendant's table, their uniforms traded for suits, their confidence gone. Grant's jaw flexed. Miller couldn't stop fidgeting. Darius rose as the bailiff called, "All rise." He put on his robe, slow, deliberate, like a man reassembling his dignity piece by piece. You may be seated, he said. The sound of chairs scraping echoed like thunder. Miss Ruiz, he began, voice steady, formal, but carrying something human underneath. You were present during the incident at South Metro Station? Yes, Your Honor, she said, standing straighter than she thought she could. You witnessed the events involving these officers and myself? Her throat tightened, but she nodded. Yes, sir. I saw them stop you. I saw them accuse you before you spoke. I told them you had scanned in. Grant shifted. His lawyer whispered, "Stay calm." End quote. Elena continued, voice trembling but growing stronger. They ignored me. One officer pushed my hand away when I tried to show your ticket log. They said I should mind my business. Darius's eyes didn't move. And you recorded this? Yes. He nodded once. Play it. Maria set the phone on the evidence monitor. The screen flickered grainy footage of that morning. The crowd watched in silence as the sound filled the courtroom. Show me your ID. I'm heading to court. Sure you are. Fracked. Click. The sound of handcuffs. The audio was clear. The humiliation was not fiction anymore, it was evidence. Miller's eyes dropped. Grant whispered something sharp under his breath. The camera zoomed in on their faces, the dawning realization of what they'd done. When the video ended, the courtroom was dead quiet. Even the air felt like it was holding its breath. Darius leaned forward slightly. Miss Ruiz, what made you speak up? Elena swallowed. Because I've seen it before. And because silence makes you part of it. He nodded slowly, eyes softening. You did the right thing. Her lips trembled. They told me I'd lose my job for filing a report. You won't, Darius said firmly. Not while I have a gavel. A murmur rose from the crowd, quiet awe. Maria glanced up at him, a small, proud smile flickering before she masked it again. The bailiff stepped forward. Your Honor, next witness? Darius shook his head. No, not yet. Let the truth settle. He looked down at the transcript, then back at the officers. This hearing isn't about my pride, he said evenly. It's about what happens when authority forgets who it serves. Grant stared at the floor. Miller clenched his fists. Elena, still standing, exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for days. Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted not in noise, but in applause muffled by glass. Inside, Darius Cole didn't smile. He simply turned the page and said quietly, Proceed. The courtroom clock ticked like a heartbeat. 10:43 a.m. By now, every camera in the gallery was fixed on the two men who once thought the subway was theirs to control. Grant sat rigid, jaw locked. Miller tried to keep his composure, but sweat darkened the collar of his shirt. Darius turned a page in the case file. The sound was soft, but it carried. You accused a federal officer of impersonation, he said. Miller cleared his throat. We acted under suspicion, Your Honor. Suspicion of what? Darius's tone didn't rise, but the silence afterward demanded an answer. Miller hesitated. Grant spoke instead. He fit the description. Darius looked up. Description of what? Grant's voice faltered. A suspect. Male. Dark clothing. And... Grant swallowed. Black. The word fell into the room like a brick through glass. No one moved. The air thickened until even breathing felt like a crime. Maria's pen stopped mid-note. Elena's hand clenched around her phone. In the back row, someone muttered, Say it again. Darius leaned forward slightly. You said black. That was the reason? Grant stammered. We have to act fast in those situations. No, Darius interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like steel, calm but final. You have to act right. For the first time, Grant looked ashamed, but the shame came too late. The camera zoomed in on Darius's face, steady, unreadable before dissolving into flashback. A teenage boy stands outside a small grocery store, sunlight bouncing off a help wanted sign. He's 16, in his Sunday best, holding a resume written in neat, careful handwriting. A police car pulls up. The officer steps out, eyes narrow. Store's closed, he says. No, sir. The boy replies. It says open. The officer grabs his arm. Don't talk back. The boy's voice shakes. Hands where I can see them. The screen flickers black and white static before fading back to the courtroom. Darius blinks once, slowly, pulling himself back to the present. His voice drops to a whisper, but every word lands heavy. I've been that boy. You called it suspicion. I called it survival. Miller shifted in his seat. We didn't mean any harm. Darius tilted his head. You didn't mean to get caught. He's won. The audience stirred a low rumble of approval mixed with disbelief. The bailiff raised a hand, but Darius waved him off. Let them hear it. He stood now, tall and deliberate. The robe framed him like armor. When I was taken from that platform, he said, you told me I didn't belong. You didn't ask what I did for a living. You didn't see the badge. You saw color. You saw threat. And you mistook silence for weakness. His voice didn't shake, but the walls seemed to. Grant whispered, almost to himself. It was a mistake. Darius looked down at him, not angry, not pitying, just exact. Mistakes are accidents, he said. What you did was habit. The quote echoed sharp, quotable, the kind that would replay online by nightfall. Elena wiped her eyes quietly. Maria stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Behind them, the room filled with that strange, collective feeling when truth finally catches up to arrogance. The tension peaked. No music, no motion, just the sound of justice breathing. Darius took his seat again, slow, unhurried. Officer Grant, he said finally, what did you say to me when you put the cuffs on? Grant's voice was faint. You're making a mistake. And I was right, Darius replied. A few people in the back gasped. The gavel hit once, not to silence the room, but to seal the moment. Voiceover fades in, low and measured. Injustice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, polite enough to pass inspection until someone forces it into the light. The camera lingered on Darius's face, half-shadowed by courtroom light. He glanced at the clock again, 10:56 a.m. The breaking point had passed. Now came the reckoning. Fade to black. The courthouse air was electric now. Everyone could feel it. The shift from outrage to reckoning. Reporters scribbled furiously. The audience whispered in disbelief, and the two officers sat frozen, realizing that every word, every gesture, every smirk from yesterday had just turned into evidence today. Darius removed his glasses and set them carefully on the bench. His movements were slow, deliberate, like a storm, choosing where to strike. Before we adjourn, he said, I have one more statement to enter into the record. The court stenographer's fingers hovered over the keys. Cameras leaned closer. Darius stood, black robe draping like armor. When you arrested me, Officer Grant, he began. You said I didn't belong in that station. You told me to keep my hands visible. You told me not to speak unless spoken to. You treated me like a threat to the law. He paused, letting the silence expand. Today, I am the law. A collective gasp filled the room. The quote landed like thunder. Phones lit up instantly. Someone whispered, he said it, he really said it. I haved. Grant's face drained of color. Miller's shoulders caved inward, as if the weight of truth had finally found them. Darius stepped down from the bench, walking toward the center of the courtroom. Each step echoed slow, powerful, unhurried. He faced the officers directly now. No desk, no barrier between them, just man to man. You asked me for ID, he said softly, so let me show you mine. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a leather case. Inside, a polished badge edged in gold, engraved with the words, United States Federal Judiciary, Judge Darius Cole. He held it up, letting the light catch it. The flash from reporters' cameras exploded like fireworks. You called me a fraud in front of strangers, he said, voice low but unwavering. But this is who I've been all along. The difference between us isn't uniform, it's understanding. Miller swallowed hard. Your Honor, we didn't know. Darius cut him off gently. And that's the problem. You never ask. You assume. He turned, addressing the courtroom now, the crowd, the cameras, the people watching at home. Yesterday, they saw a man in handcuffs. Today, they see the same man holding a gavel. But the truth is, I haven't changed at all. Only your perception has. The audience erupted not in chaos, but in applause that built like thunder under marble ceilings. Maria tried to maintain decorum, but even she felt her throat tighten. Elena covered her mouth, whispering, "That's it. That's the line." Grant slumped in his chair, staring at the floor. His lawyer leaned in to whisper, "Don't say a word." But it didn't matter. The damage was already done publicly, permanently. Darius raised a hand, and the applause slowly quieted. His voice softened. "I don't stand here to humiliate anyone. I stand here to prove that dignity doesn't need permission." Numb. He stepped back behind the bench, placing the badge beside the gavel, the symbol of law beside the symbol of restraint. "Let the record show," he said, "that the officers who questioned my belonging have now witnessed their own reflection and found themselves wanting." Carla Evans, seated near the prosecution table, murmured, "That line's going viral before lunch." Maria nodded without looking up. "Good. Maybe it'll make someone think before they reach for a gun next time." Darius exhaled slowly, his gaze distant but resolute. He wasn't speaking to them anymore. He was speaking to every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. Voiceover builds, soft piano beneath it. They tried to define him by the place he stood. Instead, he redefined the place itself. The gavel came down once firm, final. Court is adjourned. The audience stood as Darius left the bench. Reporters surged forward, flashes lit the air, and somewhere, in 1,000 living rooms across the country, the headline was already forming. He was the suspect yesterday, he's the judge today. And for once, the world didn't just watch justice, it witnessed it. The sound of the gavel still lingered in the room, echoing through oak, marble, and conscience. No one moved. Even the air felt suspended, too heavy to breathe, too charged to exhale. Then came the first sound, the slow, deliberate shuffle of papers, as Darius removed his robe. He folded it neatly, placed it over the bench, and stood in a crisp white shirt. No titles, no symbols. Just a man reclaiming what had been taken respect. He turned to face them. "Officer Grant, Officer Miller, stand." They hesitated, unsure if this was ritual or reckoning. When they finally rose, they looked smaller than they had an hour ago. Uniforms gone, arrogance stripped, eyes darting between cameras and the floor. Darius spoke softly, but the quiet made his words hit harder. "Yesterday, you used your authority to humiliate a stranger. Today I use mine to remind you what that authority was meant for." Grant's lawyer shifted in his seat. "Your Honor, my client wishes to." Darius raised a hand. "He's had plenty of chances to speak. Now he'll listen." To 19. The courtroom froze. Reporters leaned forward, sensing the gravity. "You are both hereby suspended from all active duties effective immediately," Darius continued, his voice calm, procedural, but heavy with weight. "Your conduct has violated not only the principles of due process, but the humanity it was designed to protect." Miller's lips parted. "Sir, please, it was never about race." "Then why was it only me?" Darius asked quietly. No answer. Only silence that screamed louder than any denial. Carla Evans, the oversight director, stepped forward, holding 2 sealed envelopes. She handed them to Maria, who placed them neatly on the table before the officers. Inside, formal letters of suspension, signed and time-stamped, the ink still fresh. "This is official?" Grant muttered. Carla nodded. "Filed with federal oversight this morning." Grant's face drained. "You already knew this would happen." Darius looked at him evenly. "I knew what justice would require. I just waited to see if you'd recognize it first." The quote landed like scripture. A ripple went through the audience, soft gasps. Whispered, "Damn." From the back row. Even the officers' colleagues seated in uniform along the wall looked down. The divide between us and them had just collapsed into something simpler. Truth. Darius walked toward the edge of the bench, every step echoing across marble. "You called me a fraud, you called me out of place, but the only fraud here is a badge without integrity." He let that hang, then continued. "As of now, this court recommends full disciplinary review by the Department of Justice. Pending investigation, your names will be entered into the Federal Misconduct Registry." Grant's lawyer stood again. "That's career death, Your Honor." Darius didn't flinch. "No, counselor. It's accountability, the thing your client forgot existed. Maria's pen scratched against the record, documenting every word that would echo across headlines before sundown. In the gallery, Elena Ruiz sat still, her eyes glassy with a mixture of disbelief and relief. She whispered to herself, "He did it." Darius turned toward her. "Miss Ruiz, please stand." She rose, unsure. "You risked your job to tell the truth," he said. "This court acknowledges your courage. As of today, your employment record will show commendation, not insubordination." Elena's hand covered her mouth. "Thank you, Your Honor." He nodded once. "No, thank you, for reminding this city what integrity looks like." The audience erupted into quiet applause, the kind that begins with restraint, then swells with reverence. Then, from the side aisle, a familiar voice broke through the murmurs, the precinct captain who had tried to shield the officers earlier. "Your Honor," he said, stepping forward. "If I may, I owe you an apology." Darius regarded him calmly. "For what?" "For not believing. For not stepping in sooner." The captain's voice cracked. "We've let this culture rot from the inside out." Darius studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then start fixing it. Not with words, with hiring, with training, with listening." The captain bowed his head. "Yes, sir." The gavel struck once more. "Let the apology be entered into record." Now, the camera pulled back to show the full room sunlight flooding through high windows, the suspended officers standing pale and still, the judge at the center of it all, composed, unshaken. He spoke one final time, voice low but unwavering. "Justice isn't vengeance, it's memory, and I remember what it felt like to stand where they stood powerless. That's why today must mean something." He picked up the gavel again and held it just above the wood. "For every man and woman who's ever been told they don't belong," he said, "this sound is for you." Bang. The gavel came down like a heartbeat final, resonant, alive. The courtroom rose to its feet. No chaos, no shouting, just an unspoken understanding that something irreversible had happened here the moment bias bowed before truth. Darius turned, robe draped over his arm, and walked toward the exit. The sunlight caught him in profile, half shadow, half radiance, the image of quiet power earned, not given. Voiceover fades in softly. He didn't raise his voice, he raised the standard, and as the doors closed behind him, the applause inside the courtroom grew not for a judge, not for a headline, but for the idea that justice, once broken, could still learn to breathe again. Fade to black. The courtroom was empty now. The crowd had dispersed, the reporters had vanished into rain and deadlines, and the echo of applause had settled into something softer, a peace that hadn't existed there the day before. Darius Cole stood alone at the bench, the robe hung over the chair, the gavel resting beside his folded badge. The morning light poured through the tall windows, casting stripes of gold across the floor, justice refracted, quiet, unpretentious. He picked up his phone. A single notification blinked. Number, he eyes the judge, 2-3M shares. He exhaled slowly, a breath between worlds, the man who had been humiliated, and the man who had turned that humiliation into law. Maria entered softly. "Sir, the press wants a statement. Every network's waiting." Darius smiled faintly. "Then let's give them one worth waiting for." He walked past her, down the marble corridor toward the steps of the courthouse. Cameras waited, rain drizzling against their lenses. The city seemed to hold its breath again. He paused at the top step, adjusted his tie, and looked out at the sea of microphones. His voice, when it came, wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "Yesterday," he began, "I was another black man told he didn't belong in a place built by the people. Today, I stand here as the judge of that same system, not to punish, but to remind." The reporters leaned closer, rain pattering on umbrellas. "I've seen injustice shouted from podiums and whispered in policy. I've felt it in a subway station, and I've seen it in a courtroom. It wears uniforms, it wears suits, it hides in silence. But today we saw what happens when silence speaks back." He paused, letting the rhythm breathe. His tone wasn't angry, it was anchored. "Those officers weren't my enemies. They were symptoms. The real fight isn't against people, it's against the belief that dignity is conditional. 2000. Maria, standing to the side, felt her throat tighten. Behind her, Elena Ruiz watched, her hand clutching a small folded note, the commendation Darius had signed with his own pen that morning. He continued, voice steady but warm. I don't stand above them. I stand after them. After every mistake, every assumption, every moment where justice blinked when it should have looked harder. What we did today isn't victory, it's correction. A murmur of cameras. A gust of wind. The city lights flickered as if listening. Darius looked out over the reporters, over the courthouse steps, and beyond toward the city that had once handcuffed him and now quoted him. He smiled, not with pride, but with resolve. I didn't raise my voice, he said softly. I raised the standard. That line hit like music. A dozen microphones caught it. 100 cameras repeated it. 1,000,000 viewers would hear it before midnight. Cut to montage. Cinematic voiceover with soft piano. Elena walking through the metro station again, this time. No one stops her when she helps an elderly passenger scan a card. A new poster hangs on the wall. See something wrong? Speak up. Her badge now reads, Transit Supervisor. Maria in her office, watching the news clip on her screen, the comment feed scrolling too fast to follow. She smiles through tears, whispering, he did it quietly. To date, Officer Grant and Miller exiting the courthouse in silence, heads down. No handcuffs, no jeers, just consequence walking beside them. And Darius, standing at his window that evening, the city stretched out below him. His reflection merges with the skyline, a man, and the system he reshaped. Voiceover. Darius. Justice isn't a courtroom. It's every place where someone decides to treat another person as less. It starts in the small things, the glance, the word, the choice to listen. End quote. He sets the gavel back on the desk, but the camera lingers. The symbol isn't the wood, it's the hand that wields it without anger. A soft knock on the door. Maria steps in. The Attorney General called. They want you to lead the National Reform Board. Darius turns, smiling. Tell them I already started. Outside, night settles over the city. The courthouse lights glow warm against the rain. Somewhere on a screen, his quote trends again, not as a headline, but as a promise. He didn't raise his voice. He raised the standard. Fade to black. Then, over the darkness, his final words echo like a vow. May every courtroom remember justice sounds best when it doesn't need to shout.